Hey everyone, welcome back to another Market Movers video. My name is Tyler Nethercott, better known as TPott, and today I am sharing with you 8 lessons that I learned in my first year back in the sports card hobby. I got back into things in 2019 after having collected as a child, and I learned a lot. Some things that I wish some people would have told me sooner so that I didn't make certain mistakes. So that's kind of the goal of today's video. As you know, we've been shifting to more and more educational content on this channel, and if you want to get even deeper into some of this information, you can check out the 4 Dummies book that we wrote, How to Collect and How to Invest in Sports Cards for Dummies. You can order this on cardshq.com, or you can go onto Amazon and pick up your copy. Let's get into these 8 lessons. All right, so lesson number 1 is that there are just a lot of cards. There are a ton of cards in existence, a ton of different sets, and I'm here to tell you they are not all created equal. In fact, many of them are very much not equal. I'm gonna give you some stats on just how many cards are being printed every year, and this is the number of different cards in existence. It's not all the print runs and all the totals, but the number of different like variations, sets, etc. being created by the different manufacturers. So back in 2000, 256,000 unique cards were printed by the different manufacturers. Flash forward to 2012 when Panini started to produce basketball, football cards, 571,000. Up to 2018, we were at 999,000. 2019, 1.16 million. 2020, 1.36 million. 2021, 1.8 million. And for each of the last 3 years, up to 2024, over 2 million different cards were printed. So in the last 5 years, we've seen a significant portion of the total cards in existence actually created, and it can be very confusing. So there's a few things within that I want you to know, and that is, number 1, not all serial numbered cards are created equal. In fact, many serial numbered cards, in spite of having a specific print run, might not be worth that much money at all. So what I want to do here is I want to actually look at some specific golds. I want to look at Ausar Thompson using Market Movers, and what I did was I put in Ausar Gold 2023 Raw. These are his rookie cards, numbered to 10, and you can see this top card, his Kaboom here. This card last sold for, let's see, $3,000 in January of 2025. Numbered to 10, obviously the Kaboom's very popular, and I can scroll down the list. I see Prism Gold to 10, over $1,000, his Optic Auto, $900. Then you start to see Select and other Optic cards, and as you scroll down the list, you start to get into other sets like Obsidian here, and that's only $163. So this card is actually, it is a gold, really cool looking card, honestly, numbered to 10, but $163. That was a year ago. Then you start to get down, here's a Noir Rookie Association Gold that sold a couple months ago for $160, and the prices can just keep dropping down. Like if I'm scrolling down even a little bit more, I start getting into some other products, Mosaic Introductions, so you'll see a lot of insert set parallels that don't necessarily sell for as much as the base cards outside of something like a Kaboom. So it's really important to know that. When I got back into the hobby the first year, I was finding this might sound crazy, but I was finding Luka cards, low serial number, number to 25, from sets like Chronicles and other things, thinking, oh my gosh, this card must be worth so much money because I saw the Select or the Prism of the same serial number sell for so much money. It's just not the case. Now, another thing to be aware of, unlicensed cards versus licensed cards. So historically, the last decade plus, Panini has had the licenses for basketball and football, whereas Topps has had the licenses for baseball. So if you find Panini baseball cards, they're definitely not going to be as sought after as those licensed baseball cards from Topps. And Topps is taking over the football and basketball licenses later this year and into next year. Fall of this year, 2025, they'll be getting the basketball licenses, and April 1st of 2026, they'll be getting those football licenses. So they've been producing different products over the last couple of years, including some exclusive rookie autos, but we are going to see a big jump in the demand for those Topps football and basketball cards once they're able to print those NBA logos on the cards. Other products like Leaf, Wild Card, things of that nature, there is a collector market for a lot of those cards. Leaf does some really cool stuff. They have very interesting looking cards, but they don't have the cachet and the demand and the iconicness that some of those licensed cards do. And then finally, something to be aware of, jersey numbered cards can be really popular as well as bookend serial numbered cards. So what do I mean by that? Let's say you have a card that's serial numbered to 100, but it's LeBron James and it's number 23, or it's number 6 from when he wore that number with the Miami Heat, or it's a Jordan numbered to 23 out of 100. or another player, Iverson numbered to 3, Penny Hardaway 1 of whatever. Those actually tend to command more of a premium, sometimes significantly so, depending on how big the print run and how many different cards there are overall. So jersey numbered, as well as the bookends being like number 1 of 100 and number 100 of 100, can add a little bit of a premium. So there's just a lot to understand within the space of all these cards. If you want a lot more information on this particular topic, I did a video last year that you can find on this channel called The Beginner's Guide to Every Kind of Sports Card. All right, lesson number 2 is that player performance and championships do not always correlate to price increases. In fact, many times they don't, and it can be kind of maddening. When I got back into the hobby in 2019, I had a friend, a coworker, who was doing some speculation, a little bit of flipping on eBay, low dollar stuff, and that's kind of how I got my feet wet, aside from just buying packs to try to figure out what those new products were in the Panini world and other things. But what I learned really quickly is players would play really well, and sometimes it wouldn't correspond whatsoever to their performance. In fact, even a player this year that I was really high on, I've talked about on this channel, and I've actually been completely right on, was Corbin Carroll. He had a fantastic finish second half of the year last year after a pretty poor first half of the season. And right now, he's in 3rd for NL MVP odds in Major League Baseball. He leads the league, or is tied for the league lead as of right now, with 14 home runs, tied with Judge and I think Kyle Schwarber. He's got a 977 OPS, and this is his Baseball Savant page, which is a whole bunch of red. So he's having a fantastic season. It's kind of funny to see somebody who is his size, 5'10", I don't know, probably 170 pounds soaking wet, competing for the home run lead with a guy like Aaron Judge, who's the opposite in size. But Carroll's card prices, in spite of his performance being really strong, really haven't done much. I'm looking at the last 60 days. You can see to start the season, he actually dipped on this Bowman Refractor first PSA 10, and over the last 60 days, the card's up 8%. I mean, you're seeing a lot of volatility. You're seeing some ups and downs. It's really curious. Overall, with all the Corbin Carroll cards tracked in Market Movers, he's up like 2.5% over the last 30 days. Now, I have to imagine if we push into the All-Star game and past that, and he's still in that top 3 MVP conversation, I got to think there's going to be some love given to his card prices, especially if the Diamondbacks are still in playoff contention. But this can be pretty mystifying and frustrating when you're like, wow, I hit it right. I would have been better off, just putting this money on something else, on an actual futures bet to win MVP or something along those lines, than maybe buying and speculating on their cards. So that can be pretty frustrating. Another example is Jason Tatum last year, who won obviously the NBA championship, and then his prices dipped about 20% over the following 6 weeks after winning the NBA championship. So you talk about players who have a lot baked into the expectations, and then when they actually deliver, when they actually follow through, their prices go down. The same thing happened when Patrick Mahomes won his first Super Bowl. His cards went down 25 to 30% in the following 4 to 6 weeks back in 2020 after he won his first Super Bowl. So overall, the player performance and other things, it has a lot more to do with hype cycles and like leading up to expectations, leading up to seasons, or making it into the playoffs and looking like they might toy with winning a championship than actually doing the thing. So that's the second lesson, is performance and titles, they just don't always correlate. All right, so lesson number 3 is about grading, and that grading isn't easy and it's not always profitable. Now, don't get me wrong, it can be very profitable. In fact, it can be one of the best ways to make profit in the sports card hobby. But if you don't know what you're looking at and you're not sure how to evaluate cards, it can go abysmally. In fact, I think my first ever PSA submission that I did was probably like 6 to 8 months after I got back into the hobby. I had a batch of cards that I sent in, and I got crushed. I got a 7, multiple 8s, bunch of 9s. I got some 10s, stumbled my way into those, but I didn't know how to evaluate centering. I didn't know how to look at things, and it didn't go well. I lost a lot of money on that grading submission because I thought these cards looked better than they actually did. So if you want to learn more about the specifics on how to do that, look up the video on this channel on how to evaluate your cards for grading. I did a complete breakdown, not only of how to inspect them and to look at things like centering and surface, but also how to crack them out of other cases. So you're gonna wanna check that video out. But basically, it's PSA 10 or bust when it comes to trying to make money or recoup your costs. If you get a PSA 9, a lot of times those cards will sell for less than a raw card, which is kind of crazy. It's actually really crazy, but it's the reality of how things are. It's the same thing with other grading companies, SGC, BGS, CGC. You got to get a 10. A 9.5 is not going to cut it. You're probably not going to break even with your grading costs, so you got to be really careful. Now, you can inspect your cards like crazy and still wind up stupefied. What really helps is having somebody who is somewhat of an expert do the work for you, and that's where the grading submissions come in. If you're at Cards HQ, we have our grading window here. You can drop your cards off. We partner with Got Baseball Cards in Loganville, Georgia. Right across town, Joe Davis, a legend in the industry, and his team is very good at inspecting and evaluating cards. For $3, they'll do a pre-screen, and they'll look at everything, and then they'll tell you, we don't think you should send this one, this one, this one, this one. And while it sounds like, okay, I added $3 to the cost of everything, it's gonna save you $20 to $25 on that grading cost. So even if you have like one that gets rejected, typically it's gonna offset that price. So you can also go to sportscardinvestor.com/grading if you wanna send your cards in remotely, but that partnership is one that I've used personally a ton of times. Very useful. Those guys know what they're talking about. Go give them a check out. But grading, not always profitable unless you know what you're doing. All right, tip number 4 is that liquidity matters when you're trying to speculate or flip cards for profit. Last week you saw me do the challenge with Parker, and one of the things I talked about and focused on is cards that I know are selling frequently. We've got a lot of Prism Silvers in the showcase here of different rookie quarterbacks in the NFL. So this is J.J. McCarthy's raw, and what I look for is just having multiple sales per day. This card has sold 200 times in the last 30 days. And because there are multiple sales happening every day, this is going to give price confidence to people when they're looking to buy the card. They don't want to get stuck with something that they know they can't move, or maybe it was just one fluky last comp mill. You can look at something like this and it'll show you the last sale, $68, average $74.40 over a 30-day period. People like to look at last 7, last 14, last 30 to know what's this card averaging if I think it's got some room to go up. So liquidity really matters. If you go out and you buy something obscure, I mentioned those Luka Doncic Chronicles cards earlier and other things along those lines, it can be really tough to move them. If there's no last comp other than your last comp that you bought online, even if you got a deal for it, people are going to be stuck and fixated on that price. It can be very difficult to move. So that's where I distinguish between collector cards, unique things that maybe you find really interesting, and then highly liquid, investable, or flippable cards like Prism Silvers. Those two things not always in the same universe, so you want liquidity when it comes to flipping and speculating. All right, tip number 5 is don't forget about taxes, fees, and shipping. These are real expenses that can sort of slip through the cracks when it comes to things. And it doesn't matter if you're just buying for your collection or you're trying to actually profit and flip and do some speculation. Let's start with the collecting piece. You should have a budget. If you're a collector, you should have a budget. You should keep your hobby money ideally separate from your personal funds. Make sure you can pay all your bills and meet all your obligations, and then have your hobby budget for cards or otherwise set to the side. Well, you can start adding up the prices of cards and be like, oh, this card's $20, this card's $40, this whatever. And then you forget that shipping on each of those cards from eBay costs $5, $6. And you forget that taxes are whatever, 6, 7, 8% depending on the state you live in, maybe more. And then on top of that, if you're looking to actually sell those cards at some point, you're going to pay seller fees typically. Maybe that's going to be 15% on eBay if you're selling there. Maybe you're trying to sell to a shop where they're typically only going to give you 70 to 80% of fair market value, so even more. As a general rule of thumb, I usually look at 25 to 27% as the amount that I need a card to go up to actually profit on it, assuming that I bought it online and I plan to sell it online. So if you think about the ecosystem of eBay, you're going to buy the card, you're going to pay that shipping cost, etc. So I'll give you a real world example. One of the most expensive early cards that I flipped, and this is, maybe you think this is kind of funny, but it was like a LeBron James encased card that was serial numbered, and I bought it for like $22, and then I sold it for $35, and I was pretty excited because I had just made like 12 bucks, and it was one of the first cards I ever sold on eBay, but I didn't actually make 12 bucks. I paid $5 shipping. I paid 6% sales tax. I paid for the bubble mailer to ship the card, and I paid the eBay fees, and when it was all said and done, I think I'd made like $1.23. It was not even worth my time, and that's the last piece that you need to remember is time. Value your time. Now, if you go to card show, hopefully that's fun. You network, you make friends, you meet the community, you look at awesome cards all day long, and you find some stuff for your PC. But if this is really about your side hustle or even your main hustle, you need to factor the hours that it takes in and the hustle overall to figure out how much am I actually making per hour? Could I be making more doing something else, more significant? And then still have this as a side hobby. So don't forget to value the cost of taxes, fees, shipping, and especially your time. All right, rule number 6 is if you miss out on a card, don't lose any sleep over it. There will always be more cards. I remember when I was house hunting, looking for houses, and we'd find one, we put an offer in on it, and we think it was good, and then we find out we got beat out by somebody else by $1,000 on the house. And it was frustrating, demoralizing, but ultimately we found another house, we moved in, we really like the house we're in now, maybe more than any of the others, so there's always another one out there. There's plenty of fish in the sea, as they say. So in general, you miss out on a card, another one will surface, you can go after it. There are exceptions though, and this is really important. It's sort of the other half of the story. Sometimes there aren't more. Let's take, for example, a 1 of 1, or maybe a number to 5 that barely ever surfaces that you've been looking for 5 years, and it shows up. Don't split hairs over price. Now, I'm not saying like pay some ridiculous otherworldly price for the card. I've had Andre Drummond 1 of 1s show up that I would love to have, but somebody lists them on eBay for like $2,000. I'm not going to pay that for one of those cards. It's just not worth it. Maybe $200, not $2,000. But when it comes down to it, I've seen people, and I did this early. I did this in the first year. I was nickel and diming over things, and then it's like, maybe over 5%, 2%, 8%, something along those lines. And then somebody else buys the card, or something happens and the card spikes up in value, and now you've just completely missed out on it. And that's honestly way more frustrating than the other scenario where you just pay up a little bit. If it's a card that you really want to have for your collection and somebody else knows what they've got and they know you really want it, go through the negotiation process, but don't split hairs. Be willing to pay up a little bit. So those are lessons number 6. All right, lesson number 7 that I learned the first year back in the hobby was, my first foray into Instagram and back into social media, specifically for cards. And what I learned is there are a lot of opinions, a lot of strong opinions, and many of which honestly aren't very good, at least in my opinion, and maybe a lot of opinions of a lot of others as well. There are some people who seem to make it their mission to not have this be a hobby, whether they become professional conspiracy theorists about all the things that are wrong in the hobby, or they just like to find reasons to be incredibly negative. That was eye-opening. Maybe it shouldn't have been, because that tends to unfortunately be how much of the world around us is, but I thought, this is cards, this is sports cards. People are here for a reason. It's called a hobby. Why would they be super negative? Now, this is not to discount legitimate scams and other things, whistleblowers that actually do their research and actually prove things. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about other accounts and other situations where people they don't ever post anything positive. It's always the next scandal, the next negative thing to generate clicks, to generate engagement, and to do things along those lines. In fact, there was a very notorious account a few years ago that had, been up for 2-3 years and gained a ton of followers, started out posting a lot of things like big break moments and other things, and they just started self-proclaiming as the hobby's watchdog, the hobby watchdog. Well, come to find out, that account was actually scamming people and committing crimes, and then disappeared. The owner disappeared. So that's something to be aware of too. You just sort of have to ask yourself, why is it worth somebody's time to spend hours and hours and hours, many times, it seems like 8-10 hours, if not all hours of the day, posting content about everything else that everybody else is supposedly doing wrong or might have been doing wrong, if they're maybe themselves doing something wrong and doing it as a cover. I don't know, but it's not how I want to spend my hobby. There are bigger topics in the world that would be much better served for those people's time and attention than something like sports cards in many cases. So that's sort of the first dynamic. I heard a quote several years ago that bees don't waste their time explaining to flies why honey is better than doo-doo. I'll use that and keep it PG. I like that quote a lot. This is something for me. It's not about being on the false positivity camp. If you watch my content, whether here or on the SCI channel, I try to keep it real. I try to just be really honest. And sunflowers and rainbows and kumbaya, it's not that. It's just being negative for the sake of being negative and trying to garner clicks is not the way that I think the hobby should be set up. So even more, like I said, there's other people who just have really strong opinions about the way that they think people should be collecting, the types of products they should be going after. Now, I give my opinions on those things too, especially recent video I did about relic cards that I feel like are in F tier, that people shouldn't be paying incredible amounts of money. It's more about awareness to know exactly what you're getting and have some kind of consensus amongst us about, what is or isn't a good card, so to speak. But at the end of the day, the adage definitely stands true and rings true. Collect what you like. Collect what you like. Don't be bullied into somebody else telling you that you're not a true collector. There is no such thing as a true collector. No such thing whatsoever. When it comes to building your PC, you do it however you want. Don't pay attention to others. And if you get accused of something that you know you didn't do, don't engage those people. Just leave them to the side. That was a big lesson that I had to learn in the first year. I honestly got sucked into some things, and eventually I just started saying, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm here to have fun and make friends and move on. So lesson number 7, a lot of opinions out on social media. Don't get sucked into any of those traps of negativity and debate. All right, so lesson number 8 is that time spent in the hobby does not automatically equal greater hobby wisdom and knowledge. In fact, Far from it in many cases, but you wouldn't know that. This one kind of builds on that last lesson. Again, a lot of people with strong opinions, and some of those people like to boast about how long they've been in the hobby and then criticize others for being relatively new. I remember when I first got back into things, there was a group of people who were talking about how Jeff, my boss, didn't know what he was talking about because he'd only been back in the hobby for 3 years. And yet those people had only been back in the hobby for like a year to 2 years more than he had. So at what point does it become enough? At what point does it become credible to say, hey, I might know a thing or two, while also just having the humility to say, again, like I started this video, you're always learning. We're always learning. There's always something new to uncover, some aspect of the hobby about sets or players or how to negotiate and all kinds of things to just keep learning. So people tend to think that they've been in it for a long time, they get real boasty, they discount the opinions of others if they've just kind of started their channel new on YouTube or something else. I don't buy into that. I don't subscribe to that. In fact, to me, you can put in the work. You can spend the time. You can read a dummies book. You can watch lots of videos, consume lots of content, go on blowout forums, and most importantly, probably just go to shows and shops and talk to people and get to know the community. And you can learn a heck of a lot more by accelerating that than somebody who's, I don't know, casually been in it or been really focused into a specific clique for a long time and part of a hive mind groupthink situation where they tend to think, I just know what's best, and if you don't listen to me, you don't know what you're talking about. Now, some people that come to mind for me who don't have to boast about how long they've been in the hobby. I mentioned Joe Davis, somebody like Joe who's had a shop for decades now. They have a lot of wisdom and humility about the hobby. Dr. James Beckett, other people along those lines. You won't hear them make those comments because they respect everybody else's journey. They're excited just to see new collectors and new hobbyists coming in. And they're willing to share their information. So that's kind of a big one, is just don't be gaslit or belittled into thinking that you don't have valid opinions. And it's always changing. The hobby's always changing, especially with fanatics at the helm. I know that's polarizing. I know a lot of people are really frustrated, but at the end of the day, things are going to change and evolve. They have throughout all the decades with sports cards. And if you're part of it now, you have a vote with your dollars, with your opinions, with your social media content to say what you like and what you don't like. And you should share that information however you feel comfortable doing that. So overall, those are my 8 lessons that I learned back in my first year into the hobby. There's obviously many more things. I don't want this video to be like a week long, but I would love to hear from you. So let me know down in the comments, what else would you like the community to know? Read through the comments and hopefully there's some other good ideas and which of these things stands out and resonates the most with you. Until next time, happy investing, keep on collecting, and make sure to have fun.